Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of In the Prog Seat and another episode of Album War. Today, we're going to Italy. Sal, I hope you're watching. This episode's for you, baby. We're going to go talk about, and we're not even going to do 4 albums today. We're going to do 5 because we couldn't leave one of them out. So we've got 5 absolutely drop-dead classic heavy hitters from Italy. All 5 albums were either released in 1972 or 1973, so they're all roughly from the same time period as well. Let me introduce everybody before I'm so excited to do this show. Can't even think or talk straight. Let me introduce everybody here. Louis Nasser is in the house all the way from Mexico. George LeMay is here from Chicago. From here in the Hudson Valley, our center square, Mr. Chris Canzaneri. From the boroughs of New York City, Chuck Alvarez. From upstate, horse racing is ready to start real soon.
Full swing.
Land of Saratoga, Mr. Eric Porter is in the house. And of course, the professor of Prague from down in New Jersey, Mr. Ken Golden is here. What's happening, gentlemen?
Good evening. Good.
Ken did such a nice job of kind of putting it out there, the homework he's been doing on Facebook all week, especially during the weekend. A lot of people, I think, are excited about this episode. I hope so. Hopefully, we don't get people watching saying, I don't know any of these bands. Because if you're watching In the Prog Seat and you don't know any of these Italian bands, you got to get caught up on some of your prog, because I think these.
You know what was interesting, Pete? The comments I got and people mentioning other albums, you realize just how deep the Italian prog scene was.
Yeah,
and everybody has their favorites, and
I mean, we picked these 5, and we're going to tell you what they are in a second. In all the years I've been listening to prog, no matter who I've talked to, what I've read on the internet, books, all that, these 5 albums and these 5 bands are legendary in Italian prog. Are there other great Italian prog albums? For sure. Are folks watching maybe going to have albums by some of these bands that they might like a little bit more? Perhaps. But we looked at 2 years, and I don't know, all 5 of these are classic albums when it comes to Italian prog. So, I mean, you could pick other albums for sure. There's no right or wrong answer, but you gotta, we were going to pick 4, but we figured 1 album had to be included as well. So we're upping this one to 5. How we're going to do it, we're going to go around twice, and we're going to start off with everybody's 5, 4, and 3, and then the second round 2 and 1. Ken, I'm going to ask you to hold up the albums one at a time here. Let's the first one is PFM, Premiata Fornero Marconi Per Un Amico, from 1972. Look at that bad boy right there. The next combatant, also from 1972, Banco del Mutuo Soccorso. Hope I'm saying these correctly. Darwin. Doing my best. Doing my best.
Man, you're Italian. You better.
I know. I should. Look at that gatefold. Lovely, lovely stuff there. Also from 1972, Il Balletto Di Bronzo Is. I guess that's how you say that. Is. From 1973, Museo Rosenbach Zarathustra.
actually, I guess it should be. Technically, it should be like this.
Yeah, that is true. And last but certainly not least, from 1973, also Le Orme Felona e Sorona. Look at that. Oh, we got a little naked ladies here on the show. There goes our PG-13 rating down the.
Are we gonna get booted?
Stop it. Oh,
it's an album cover. Who cares?
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah.
You want me to get the Post-its out?
That's okay.
It has Barbara Streisand on it too.
Yeah, that's true.
So everybody has ranked these from 5 to 1 in their order of preference. As we were talking before we started recording, we've had a really hard time with this one because so many of these albums are, or all of them are, like I said, classics. And for me personally, I could change this ranking tomorrow, next week. Might be a little different, but I feel pretty happy with mine. I got to a point I'm not switching them around anymore. So seeing as these are all albums known for their instrumental prowess as well as their vocal ability, Eric Porter is going to go first today.
Wow. Okay. Well, I might be the contrarian tonight, only because I owned all of these at one time. I now only own one. I just found that I didn't listen to these very often, and we had a little conversation. Nobody ever gives away what they're doing or what they're picking, but we had a little back and forth, and Luis threw out there possibly, is it the singing in Italian that might have thrown me off a little bit? I don't think so. I don't think that bothers me. I think there's some really good singing here. But I can't say it just was something that, and I'm sure you guys have done this. You kind of go through your shelves and trying to make room for new stuff or other stuff, and you end up selling some stuff off. So I only actually still have one of these, but for my number 5, I'm going with Orme, and Pete, I'll mispronounce all of these as well. I like this. I know we're talking classic stuff. I just kind of feel like for me, this stuff, the Le Orme was a little mellow at times. It's good. It's that symphonic. If you love the symphonic stuff, I mean, you're probably gonna like all of this. But I just found that one to be maybe a little tepid compared to the others. That's pretty much the best thing I can come up with that one. My number 4, which it's funny because I remember Cans was talking about his order, and he's like, I think Cans, you said one of your 4 had gone to 1 and stuff's going around. This is an album that I really like this one. But it's so, you guys will know the minute I use the word chaotic, that sometimes it's hard to wrap my head around this one in terms of listening it for enjoyment. And that's the Il Balletto Di Bronzo. And I'll show my American side, and I always called it YS, so I have no idea, the pronunciation of that. But this one is, it's crazy. I mean, the music is intense, heavy, dark. So these last 4 are ones I like. I just don't know if this is one I would sit and really listen to for enjoyment. I loved going back and hearing this, and I kind of questioned, geez, maybe I shouldn't have gotten rid of this one. That's really the best description I can use for that one, is just it's intense, heavy, dark, and chaotic. That's kind of my wrap for that one. And then obviously we're only going to 3. The 1, 2, and 3 were tough for me. This is where I really was playing with the order, but for number 3, I'm going to go with Banco Darwin. 2 amazing keyboard players, very symphonic, very orchestrated, very classical. I mean, you hear a lot of classical influence in this stuff. These, Pete, you said it. I don't know that tomorrow or next week or next year, if we revisit them, this order could change. I'd probably have to go back and watch this episode to see what I did so I could be consistent. But and I think they're brothers, right? So the 2 keyboard players are brothers. I really like the Banco, and that's another one where I'm after I went back and listened to it, I'm like, maybe I shouldn't have gotten rid of this one. But honestly, I didn't listen to these much when I had them. I think, like you said, reading about the Italian prog scene, these were the big records. So obviously I had to go out and get them. But I don't know. I just, again, the vocal, very vocal heavy. I know I did see Banco at Nearfest. Very impressed with their live performance at Nearfest. That was an amazing show. I believe they were in Trenton when they played, correct? Am I correct on
No,
that?
they were at Zellner.
They were at Zone. Okay.
Both times. Yeah.
Okay. I only saw the first one, but terrific band. Like I said, the 2 keyboard players, very orchestral, very symphonic. But that's my number 3, Darwin.
All right. Ken, over to you.
Me?
Yes.
Okay. This was virtually impossible to pick. Pete, you did well. You picked 5. I mean, yeah. I mean, because this whatever I pick as number 5 could be number 1 tomorrow.
Yep.
So no, there were no wrong answers except for maybe Louis. But all right, my number 5. Yeah, all amazing records in every way, shape, and form. My number 5, believe it or not, for me is PFM, Per Un Amico. I love it. It's a masterpiece. They're all masterpieces. We're talking about 1A, 1B, 1C, and 1D. For me, Mauro Pagani, he's the X factor. He's what, really made the early PFM albums, well, certainly different from the later ones, and I think better. I mean, I like Jet Lag and all that, but Pagani's flute and violin, I think, made quite a bit of difference in their sound. Of all the bands we're talking about, to me, they were the most, I would call them lyrical. A lot of the music has a bit of a pastoral feel, but it's fantastic. I mean, Flavio Promoli's keyboard work is fantastic. I may prefer Storia di un Minuto a little bit better. I think, Pete, you and I talked about this at one point. They're almost interchangeable.
Yeah.
This has Il Banchetto, which is, that's one of their signature pieces. It's an amazing record, and I absolutely love it. But I guess today I love the other four a little bit more. Next, I got this is one of my all-time favorites. This was tough. Le Orme. Oh yeah, why are we backwards? Am I backwards? Yeah.
Oh,
You're fine.
Oh, you're fine.
I mean, you're retarded, but the image is.
I am retarded, but everything's no. I'm seeing it backwards. So are you? So
No, you're fine here.
and I don't have Prezi on.
You
So,
sure you don't have
anyway.
Prezi? It looks like you might have Prezi on. Maybe you turned it on by mistake.
Let me
Have the logo on the top
Yeah,
corner.
you got the logo in the corner there.
oh yeah. Let me bear with me one sec. Let me close it.
You see, people, I wasn't just kidding.
Yeah, I'm not so smart. Did I do it right?
No.
No, I'll figure it out.
Okay.
I'll figure it out. So anyway, this is the most bombastic. This is the most dynamic of all the albums we're talking about. The obvious comparison is ELP because of, them being the trio. Tony Pagliuca's synthesizer work, I think, is just like crazy. The thing that always stood out to me about this album is the way it just builds to this climax, this incredible climax. The ending of the album, which is Ritorno al Nulla, it's just absolutely incredible the way it builds. And they had a lot of great albums. For me, this is their best. If you want to make an argument for Uomo di Pesa, I wouldn't fight you, but this is a great record. Number 3, this was hard. At one point, this was my number 1, and now it fell to number 3, and that's Il Balletto Di Bronzo. So to me, it's basically like, it's the total package. I mean, it has everything. You have bombastic keyboards, you got ripping guitar. To me, it's almost like if Keith Emerson played with Deep Purple. This album just makes all the right moves. And I would say of all the bands, and all these bands had very good vocals, I would say that Gianni Leone's vocals were probably the weakest. And that might have stopped it from being ranked a little bit higher at the end of the day. It has a less refined quality than the other albums. And it's got some just great heavy parts to it. I just love it. And it's just, it was funny. I used to own it and I sold it and then I bought it back. And then I just like immersed myself in it. And I just realized just how just incredible this record is. And a lot of people consider this one the best Italian album. You don't get any arguments from me. So that's my number 3. Now I'm going to go play with Prezi.
George, how about you?
My number 5 is Le Orme. I think this is a step below the other 4. To me, this could have been excluded. I like Equilibrio and like Ken said, Ritorno al Nulla, but I find the rest I don't connect with. I was expecting two more also because I like the production and I like the vocals more than some of these other ones, but something about the songwriting I just doesn't connect with me. Number four, I got the Balletto Di Bronzo. Some of the best stuff musically. But the vocalist grates on me. I agree with Ken that he's probably the least good in this bunch. I just think some of the arrangements are a bit haphazard too. I don't quite connect with that. And it's also front loaded. After you get past that big epic, is a noticeable drop for me. But I would echo what Ken said. I see a lot of people say this is the best, and it's raw, exploratory. So I kind of get that because I like those qualities too. But I don't know, for some reason I've never been able to get into it like I do the top three here. Number three, I'm gonna go with Banco. I had this above PFM on our 1972 show, but I got to change course here. I like every song on this except for 750,000. That gets a little over dramatic for me and spotlight the vocals in a way I don't find that pleasant. But man, the rest of it's so good. Every song, it just get into all of it. And for me, as a career arc, we're not talking about that, but for the career arc, I think they're my favorite Italian band. So got that at number three.
All right.
George, I want to ask you a question because you're a guy who grew up listening to heavier stuff, right? Listening to metal and listening to a lot of like jazz rock, things like that. Was it hard for you to kind of get into this Italian stuff?
Yes. Yeah. First time I tried, none of it was getting to me. I was picking apart a lot of the stuff that I didn't like, especially the vocals. I disagree with what Lewis said in chat yesterday. I don't think these guys are great, any of them.
Really? That's interesting.
Maybe one guy, the top guy, but yeah, I couldn't get it the first time. It took me to give it a rest and then go back. And when I went back, I was like, okay, I get it now. It's a time frame thing too. I think in its time, I probably would have been my favorite stuff.
You're a little older, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, Mr. Canzaneri, you're up.
Okay. Like Ken said, these are all like 1A, B, C, D, E. The margins between them are razor thin. It's like, fucking Paul Sorvino slicing the garlic on Goodfellas, that's how thin it is between each of these things. And these albums are all fairly new to me. I'm new to being an Italian prog fan, and I recently became Italian, so I'm enjoying that. So
halfway there.
Yeah, So let me start with my number 5, 5th place. So I got Prezi here. Does it? Yeah, it still works. Le Orme. I kind of want to echo what Eric said. I thought this was a little mellow. I know Ken said it was bombastic, but this, it seemed a little bit light to me compared to the other ones. I didn't really dig the lyrics. I don't understand what the fuck he's saying, but the way the stuff rhymed together didn't hit for me on a couple of them. I don't know, but I like the sort of El Greco inspired cover art.
You're holding up the English language version that
Cool.
Peter Hamill. So that's Peter Hamill wrote the lyrics in English for the band, and Aldo Tagliapietra re-recorded.
That's not what I listened to. This is just an image I stole off the internet.
Well, it's good because the English language version, it sucks.
Can I ask a question now that because I had a couple PFM that were English, like Photos of Ghosts instead of whatever. How many of these bands did English versions of their albums?
So what happened was the PFM and Banco got signed to ELP's Manticore label.
Okay.
And what the albums which were released in the US and released in Europe, the bands went back and re-recorded certain tracks, rearranged some stuff with English vocals. They're actually kind of like more like compilations, like the brown cover Banco album, where you see Francesco with the shoe in the air and photos of ghosts. Those are actually, in a sense, reworkings of material that they had done for, in the case of PFM, for Storia di un Minuto and Per Un Amico. And from Banco, I think they're drawn from the self-titled, and maybe from Darwin. And there are, if I'm not mistaken, I haven't listened to those records in a long time, there is some unique music to those records. So, and what's the interesting thing is that there was an English language version of Il Balletto Di Bronzo Yeast, which was never released. And Mellow Records actually put it out on CD. I don't know if it was the full album, but that did come out as a CD. Anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My
So
recommendation for
not
watching, stay away from the English language versions of these albums.
Yeah, you won't get it. Because, I mean, like Francesco, I think he's an amazing vocalist. You don't want to hear him singing in English.
I don't think Eric wants to hear him singing at all.
No, probably not. And
Some.
No,
and what's disappointing is Eric, you have Italian blood in you, right?
I do.
You what was it? It was
My grandmother on my father's side was from Italy, but she married a Porter, so
Oh, I thought it was Porterelli, and you shortened it.
Yeah, maybe
You
that's
came
what it
through
was.
Ellis Island.
okay. Enough of that one. All right, my number 4, PFM. I love this album. I talked about it on another show. I think it was our favorite sophomore album show or whatever. I really enjoy the violin and piano playing on this record. But it kind of lodged into the, like, it's a little soft, it's a little light compared to the others for me at this moment. So it got gigged for that, which means nothing in the grand scheme of things. You know, I could change my mind tomorrow. Like everybody says, these are all so close. So PFM came in 4th. And for me at 3rd, Yeast, Balletto Di Bronzo. I really enjoyed this album. I am surprised it fell this far, but all kinds of crazy shit has been happening since we started listening to these. I enjoy the darkness. I enjoy the bombastic, craziness of the arrangements. I really like the guitar playing. The guitar tones, though, at times they can be great, just grating. I mean, in the first song, the Introduction or whatever, I'm hearing him play and it's in the left, I had headphones on and I'm like thinking to myself, like, okay, cool. They're really stretching out, with modern synth sounds, because this shit was all fairly new back then and they're experimenting. But what is this like little bee going in my ear? Like, like that was the guitar. And I'm like, oh, and then I, sort of started keying in on it. And I'm like, the guy's kicking ass, but I wish he just had a little more body to the tone, but, this, being in 3rd, my top 3, they're cutting the garlic even thinner now. So this is 3rd place, but by no means is it your normal 3rd place kind of ranking. So killer album. I love it.
Lewis, if I remember correctly, back when we were doing the album homework assignment show, didn't you give this to Chris Allo?
I sure did.
Yeah, you did, right?
And he liked it.
He was like, I like this. I don't understand it, but I like it.
Yeah, I was expecting Aloe to just go full Aloe. And he didn't. He actually enjoyed it, I was very happy about that.
Yeah, I remember that. God, it seems like so long ago.
Pretty heavy.
All right, Chuck, what do you got?
All right. Very thin. Very, very, very thin. What's probably the only one here. No, actually, no. Cans just said that he also loved all 5 as well. It was hard, man. But so like literally, I went down to to the last second on what my 5 through 1 was going to be, and I just my number 5 is Le Orme. I think that Humo de Pieza is probably the better of the 2 albums, but that doesn't necessarily mean that this album Motoda isn't killer. Motoda, I love the softness of it. Still, Motoda, still a great album. I still love the album. My number 4 is where Premiata Faneria Marconi. Motoda, that's another great album. My number 4. And probably I'm probably the only one I'm the only one that's probably going to pick this one as my number 3, which is Museo Rosenbach. You know, it was one of these albums that, like I said, any of these albums could have been my number 1. And I said I just basically just went with what my heart said. And as much as I wanted to keep to pull a little fast one here, so by just rating all 5 of these albums as a number 1, I just couldn't do it, man. I did this list and I'm just kicking myself because I don't think that any of these albums are any lesser than the other. But my number 3 is Museo Rosenbach's masterpiece. You know, I wish that Area International Pop Band was in here as well. You know, that probably would have been my easy number 1 for anything that they had there. But that's this. Those are my 5 through 3: Le Orme, PFM, and Museo Rosenbach.
All right, that makes it very interesting now. Okay, cool. Lewis.
Okay. As has been said before, but I think it's worth repeating, all of these records are incredible. And I think that people should buy them.
Yep.
Don't fucking steal them, buy them.
Yep.
And take the time to listen to them. Really.
That's why we have Ken there.
You know, whatever you need to do, just get your hands on them. We live in interesting times. I know that now in the street markets in Mexico City, at Chopo, you can buy LPs for some of these. So excuses run out. Anyway, it was very hard for me to choose for those reasons. But my number 5 is going to be Le Orme Felona Sorona. That's a strange album. It's this weird story about 2 planets that orbit each other, and this cosmic dance is what keeps the universe together, which, as a physicist, makes me cringe. And then it has the other drawback that it is bookend heavy, meaning the opening track and the closer are dynamite. And the stuff in the middle is also wonderful, but is not as good compared to the others. It loses a lot of fortitude. There's a lot of very ballady stuff happening. Very soft. Not bad, but it's just not. So it really does feel like 2 records in one, in a way, to me. I'm kind of partial to Contrapunto myself.
Yeah.
It's but look, all of these are fucking great. So it's my number 5. My number 4 is going to be Per Un Amico from PFM, which actually Premiata Forneria Marconi that's just the name of a bakery. I love that. I don't know why I think that is so great. They name your band after a bakery, but that's what they did. And
way, man, it's the Italian way.
It's look, it's a record that is very, very treacherous because it hides a lot of absolutely killer playing with really sweet melodies and arrangements and things. But man, some of these guys are just blazing. I mean, the violins, the keyboards, everything in this record is great. And yeah, it may appear a little bit at times to be a little too sugary or a little too sweet, but if you really listen to it, it's not. It's really great. Really, really great. And my number 3 is going to be for Banco del Mutuo Soccorso. Now, look, Banco is one of my all-time favorite bands. I don't care, Italian or whatever. They're just amazing. And like with PFM, we had the opportunity to open for them with Sona Sombra in Chicago. And the bass player at that time was Patrick Chivas, who's no longer, he was not the guy who recorded Per Un Amico, new guy, but he used to play with Aria. Phenomenal dude. Those guys are great people. We had a great time. And PFM live, like Banco, sounds better than the records, in my opinion. but Banco especially is better live. When I first saw Banco in Near Fest, I had never heard a note of them. I didn't know who the hell they were. And after the second song, I was in tears in my seat. I was just not prepared for that. It's really great stuff. Francisco Giacomo is one of my favorite vocalists of all time. And that Left Hand of God, Vittorio De Nozenzi, holy fucking shit. If you guys want to hear some next level piano playing, go check that out. That's all I can tell you. I mean, especially if you guys actually know a little bit about music and about piano in particular, you owe it to yourselves to listen to these records. They're incredible. It's just that live, somehow they do an even better job. I don't know how it's possible, but they do. So that'll be my 5, 4, and 3. Darwin, great song. I mean, I for example, the 750,000 tune is so much better live on the record. And that's true of all the catalog. Everything they do live, they just elevate it. So, which is that's the hallmark of a good band, right?
Yeah.
They never put out a good live album in the 70s that represented the early material.
Right.
They did have a live album, but it kind of blew. I mean, they kind of made up for it later on when they reformed, when they kind of got back into doing the prog stuff. But we never, there's one archival live thing that came out from 75, which is actually quite nice. But that wasn't released like on recording. It wasn't, on a major, it wasn't like a kind of major release.
I have a live from Mexico, which is really good.
Yeah, but that was later, and it was great.
That's the later stuff, yes.
Yeah,
they have Popoto playing the various brass instruments and all that. Great. Those are the guys we saw at Nearfest.
Oh, that would have made Anthony very happy.
Well, we can just tell him it was written by it was redone by Stephen Wilson, and he'll buy 6 copies of it.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So as everybody said, this was really tough. And I think going into this, because I've had all these albums for a long time. I know them all very well. I had it in my head how I thought the ranking for me was going to go. And then as I was re-listening to everything again, it changed a little bit. But I will say there's no losers here. All of these albums I love a lot. But my number 5 is going to be Il Balletto Di Bronzo, which I expected to be much higher going in. And I mean, this is just like, it's a crazy album. It's just so jarring and heavy and weird and odd, and it's symphonic on one hand, it's rocking on the other, it's kind of avant-garde in spots. I agree with Chris. I think some of the guitar tones are just really weird. But I mean, there's stuff like Secondo and Contro, which is like the Italian Deep Purple with loads of mellotron. I mean, that's a great combination right there. I mean, you can't, Introduzione is just amazing. It's again so off the wall, but I love it. But I think, like, in revisiting it again all these years later, I think that my outlook on it and my ultimate, because if we would have done this like 10 years ago, this probably would have been my number 1. But I think that some of these other albums have kind of risen a little bit above it for me all these years later. I still think it's great. I still love it. And it's amazing how much different it is than the first album. That's like the crazy thing. You listen to that first album, you listen to this, it's like 2 different bands.
It is 2 different bands.
Pretty much, right? Yeah.
Johnny Leone joined, and he wrote
all the stuff. He totally took over. Yeah. My number 4 is going to be Darwin by Banco. I mean, we could have picked any of their first bunch of albums. They're all great. The third album I almost considered, I went with this kind of whole 72, 73 concept, but we really could have picked any albums from any of these bands around this time period, because a bunch of them have released like 2 albums a year and whatnot. Very cool concept album. I love Francesco's vocals. I think he's amazing. He's kind of like an opera singer in a prog band, basically. I think he's awesome. There's amazing keyboard work on this album. I mean, the Hammond, the Moog, it's just the piano, just absolutely amazing. I love the 14-minute opener of Illusione, or however the hell you say it. That's just amazing. Man, so many good songs on here. Cento Mani, Cento Occhi. I mean, just got great groove. Hammond organ is so great. Uh it's like the Italian ELP for me. It's just but more, right? There's more here to that. I just love the vibe of this whole album, and I think it's one of their best. I don't think I've ever called it my favorite. I think their third album, or even their first album, I generally might rank a little higher, but I think this is an amazing album, and it's one of their best for sure. So that's my number 4, and my number 3 is going to be Felona e Sorona from Le Orme. I love the album artwork. Again, love the keyboards. I mean, most of these albums have just amazing keyboards. And, here the Moog is just crazy good. The Hammond is so good. I agree with what everybody said. I think that like you got the bookends of the album are absolutely amazing. Some of the stuff in the middle, maybe not quite up to those standards, but the first and last songs for me are so good that I had to put it at number 3. I really love this album. I just think it's a lovely album. And yeah, it is a little mellower, a little more atmospheric, a little more maybe pastoral in spots, but it's got a lot of bombast as well. Maybe I would have liked a little bit more guitar here and there, but it's got that ELP feel, which I think is fine. I don't know. It's great. I love it. It's my favorite from them, and it's my number 3. Back to Eric for 2 and 1.
Okay, so my number 2, I'm going with PFM. This one, I know what Luis was saying about maybe a little sweet, but I think the melodies are the most memorable to me. Of the 5, they just sit with me. They do have a lot of atmospheric stuff. Great piano, but the violin and the flute, essential. I love those. The title track has a really nice acoustic guitar, got some violin and flute. I really like that. I really enjoyed that part of it. And I think they do, which is kind of funny because I had Leorm at 5. I think they have a lot of, I think what we were saying, like a pastoral passages through these. But the keyboard work I think is phenomenal. I love the piano playing on that one. So that's my number 2, and that leaves Museo Rosenbach for number 1. I won't pronounce any names, but again, I like this one. I really like. Now, to me, this had the most prominent guitar. Not that there was a ton of guitar on the other ones, but outside of YS, or however, yes, whatever we're going to call it. But I think this one, again, this one kind of matched up maybe with the Balletto Di Bronzo the best, where it's heavy, it's dark. I like the Tron on this. I think they use the Tron really well on this record. Not the biggest, maybe the vocals are a bit of I know I can't remember which record people were saying. I think the Il Balletto Di Bronzo, these aren't, I don't know if they're that much better than that record, but for some reason it is probably the guitar for me. I just thought this one really just, and I know all these bands are using Hammond or some type of organ. This one had a really nice, and maybe it's the combination of the guitar and the organ. Even the organ had like a little more bite to it than on some of the other albums. So this one, I don't know. I think this right out of the gate, I went back and listened to this, which had been quite a while. And probably after 1 or 2 listens, I was like, this is going to be my number 1. So I'm going with Museo Rosenbach at number 1.
Is this the one you still own?
Yes.
There you go. Okay. It's funny when you were mentioning this whole kind of pastoral thing. I think one description that nobody's brought up yet today that myself personally always attached to a lot of these bands, and probably most specifically the Le Orme album, it's got this romanticness to it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these Italian prog bands, they have that kind of romantic flair in their music, and I think it's maybe has to do with the expressiveness and the emotion kind of displayed in the vocals. But it's one thing I always use when I describe the Italian prog scene. But
then what's up? But then I know you mentioned that, and so I had mentioned Area, and Area is like they actually function as a jazz rock band, but then when you listen to their vocals, there's nothing operatic about that band.
No, not at all.
But Stratos was using his voice as an instrument.
Oh, loved them. died so young. He's been dead for so many years now. Mhm. Yep. That's another great band. I think you should check them out, Eric.
George, did you ever hear Aria?
Okay.
Yeah,
Not for you.
I like it musically, but that vocalist is tough to take. Eric would hate that guy.
Yeah, I know he would.
Me, he's the best. Demetrius Stratos.
Didn't he
He's
have like
known for a lot of stuff, yeah, but
wasn't it like
yeah.
a 7-octave range?
Yes, he did. Mhm.
It's crazy.
He's incredible.
Yep, he was amazing, man.
Aria, if you had chosen Aria Arbeck McFry, that would have been my number one.
That'd have been my number one. It wouldn't have even been close.
Wow.
Part
Yeah,
two.
so many good albums that we could have chosen from here. A lot of people can on Facebook were like, you got to include Semiramis, right? There's
Another one.
Promise, Locanda della
Number
Fate,
two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Locanda.
Yep. Mhm.
They were just
Mhm.
throwing everything at you. You know?
Yeah, Arti Mistieri. I mean, there's a lot of classic Italian.
Mhm.
Part
Yeah.
two.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
All right, so we have our first place points here from Museo Rosenbach. Ken, over to you.
Okay, my number 2 is Banco. So Banco is my favorite Italian band. They had in the 70s, they really had an incredible body of work. This is not my favorite Banco album. Darwin is not. Di Terra is actually the instrumental album. It's actually my favorite Banco album, not because it's instrumental, just because compositionally I think it's astounding. But I love Darwin. Maybe on any given day, I might like Io sono nato libero a little bit better, maybe.
Yeah,
But almost a
Number
coin
one.
toss with, like with the PFMs we were talking about. I think that of all the bands we're talking about, they were the most musically complex. They were the 2 keyboard players, the 2 brothers, Gianni and Vittorio Nocenzi, and the way these 2 guys complemented one another, the interplay between them, I think was phenomenal. You had Francesco Di Giacomo singing, and I mean, he had an operatic style. I don't know if he was truly an opera singer. I don't know that he was like Placido Domingo, but he certainly had that style. And that gave the music a bit of a classical flavor. The guy that I think gets overlooked is the guitarist on this album, Marcello Todaro, because there's so much going on with the keyboards, with the 2 keyboards, that I think he kind of gets overlooked. Album opens up with 14-minute La Illusion. That's one of their signature pieces that they kind of played till the end. And Francesco passed away. I don't know how many years it is. What, 5-6 years more now? And the new version of Banco, Vittorio Nocenzi is still doing it. They sound different, but man, he still can play. If you watch some of the videos that they put out for the 2 albums that they did for Inside Out, Vittorio, he's killing it. So he's just kind of adapted the Banco sound of the 70s into the modern age, and I thought that they were actually pretty successful albums. I like Orlando, the last one they did. My number 1, Museo Rosenbach.
You got it right, Ken.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Eric, yeah, I sent you the crib notes, So concept album based around the writings of Friedrich Nietzsche. I wouldn't know Nietzsche in English or German or Italian, wouldn't make a difference to me. Side 2, maybe it's the slightest of a letdown, only because Side 1, the Zarathustra Suite, it's probably the greatest song in Italian prog history. Just the album has this incredible energy. I think that Stefano Gallifi, I think it's a very soulful voice. I really complimented the music. Pitt Karate, the keyboard player, he was one and done. Became an architect after this. His keyboard work's fantastic. The album's filled with mellotron, organ. If he's I think I hear synthesizer, but there's no credits for synthesizer. So music seems to draw very heavily from the English scene. You can hear a little Genesis, a little King Crimson, a little ELP. They kind of stole from the best, but they made it their own. And so I'll just throw it like an interesting fact out. When this when this came out on CD, it was one of the first CDs. So, and it was actually, this album on CD was one of the reasons how I started The Laser's Edge, because this album was always a fortune, and I was collecting vinyl. I was a crazy audiophile. I had to bug up my ass about CDs. I would never own one. And Museo Rosenbach was like, it was approaching like $1,000. This is 1987, and King Records licensed the album, and they put it out on CD in Japan, and it was killing me. It was like $1,000 for the vinyl or $28 for the CD. I said, "Fuck it, I'm gonna buy it." So I bought the CD, and I bought a bunch of other Japanese CDs, and I didn't even own a CD player. And I had like this many CDs. I remember I had like Nectar, Remember the Future with the Bad Mix. I had a whole bunch of things I bought in the village, and I had this. And then little by little, over time, the bookcase started getting bigger and bigger. So finally, I said to my wife, I think maybe I should buy a CD player and listen to these things. So I finally got to hear Museo Rosenbach. I mean, and this album just totally rocked my world. I mean, I had never heard it before. It was unbelievable. And then I just said to my wife, I said, as time would go on, I said, I think there's a business here. I'm not sure what it is. And then just one day I said, the business is, there are other schmucks like me that would spend $28 on a CD, and they won't spend like $500 or $1,000 on the vinyl. And then and that's how I started The Laser's Edge. I started importing these titles from Japanese distributors, and I was finding U.S. distributors. I was bringing all this stuff in, and then and then I started selling all this. The next thing I know, I was dealing with German labels. I was dealing with everybody all over the world. But Museo Rosenbach was one of the very first CDs in general, and it's a boring fact, but I just presented it to you, and and it's one of the reasons why I started Laser's Edge.
Excellent.
Very cool. Great album to have the inspiration on, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great record. Great record.
All right. 2 votes for Museo Rosenbach in slot number 1. George?
Number 2 is the PFM. For me, the best production and the best vocals in this whole group. I think that's why I ended up leapfrogging it above the Banco this time around. Realistically, you could flop those albums anytime for me, but and then I agree with Lewis. It's a little sweet and pastoral. I hate that word. It just means fairy dust is on it, but usually not my thing. But it doesn't bother me on this record. Something about it I do appreciate it. So I ended up putting it at 2. And number 1 is Museo Rosenbach. For me, the most complete vision of all these albums, the least chinks in the armor. And like people have said, it's dark. Of course, coming from metal, I appreciate the darkness of it. I just feel like it's the most engaging all the way through. So I thought it would be number 1, and it is number 1 for me.
All right. Chris?
Okay. Number 4, Banco. This is one that had started low, and today, a couple more listens, it shot up to number 2. This, I think, in a group of very sophisticated albums, this may be the most sophisticated one. At least has the most instrumentation. I'm hearing vibes on there. I'm not hearing vibes on any of the other albums. I dig vibes. There are actually some legitimately jazzy interludes here, like real jazz chords, Luis, not like fucking Steely Dan or something, and it's a pleasant album. I really, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have to find a copy of this for myself. So, good luck to me, Ken,
Ken.
but
I have a CD. I may have a spare vinyl. I'll check.
yeah, I might have to go with the CD, but we'll see. I really love this. Pretty damn good. And then, like everybody else so far, Museo Rosenbach came in at first. And arguably the least sophisticated album out of all of these. It's very straightforward. It's very accessible, relatively speaking. But it's just heavy. It's a brawny album. I mean, it's rock and roll, it's progressive and whatever else, but this album rocks. I enjoyed it. I love the guitar playing. The vocals don't bother me at all. And this is definitely another one I gotta grab a copy of. I think I've seen vinyl reissues on this one that aren't too crazy expensive. So, but anyway, I recommend that everybody else go out and buy it who doesn't have it too. So, number one.
The band El Tempio della Classidre, they were named after the last part of the album. And they, if I remember correctly, when they played at Nearfest, they had Stefano Gallifi with them, and they did the Zarathustra suite. If Chad was here, not dicking around somewhere, he'd set me straight. But I'm pretty sure that's the case.
Chad will have to confirm in the comments, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
He's off with his Gumar.
Rice and garlic with his kumar.
That's right. All right, Museo Rosenbach taking a commanding lead here. Chuck, you gonna mess with that at all?
Well, remember, you already know.
You already did. Yes, you already did. Okay.
I already did. Mm-hmm. Well, my number two, I love chaos, with some bands like Van de Graaff Generator and Area, two bands that I really do love. So my number two is going to be Il Balletto Di Bronzo, Yeast. So that leaves Banco. I think that, in my opinion, and so is probably the best of the 5 albums here, and so, but not by much. But it's my favorite of the 5. It's an album that I've had for many years, and what's that one that I've literally wore to pieces. I used to listen to this with my buddies, and we basically just scratched the vinyl up. So just basically rendered it worthless and unplayable. But yeah, but Banco is going to be my number one.
So Chuck, question: is Darwin your favorite Banco album, or you have another favorite?
The following album is my favorite.
Yeah, the third album is pretty great, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic album, and that's when people should also pay attention to their rhythm section as well. Their rhythm section was absolutely astounding. They had in my opinion the best singer from that entire genre, and they was just a killer band. Banco, the Mutuo de Socurso.
All right, first number one from Darwin. All right, Lewis.
I love the fact that they named their band after a bank. You remember, Chuck, when they were at the first Nearfest?
I wasn't there, but I do remember.
Oh, that's right. He's introducing Popoto, and he says he has a head full of hair, and it fills me with rage. And then when he's not singing, Popoto was there playing. He was kind of standing in his way, and he just jabbed him in the crack of his ass to move him out of the way, like mid-line. Dude's playing, and he just went like that right in his ass. I love that guy. I wept like a fat chick on prom night when he died. I did. I hardly ever spoke. I only spoke to him briefly that one time, but that man touched my soul in a very profound way. So I do miss him. And I will hopefully encourage people to go buy these records and hear them, because they're that good. That said, we have to continue picking the impossible picks, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my number 2 is going to go to what can best be described as ELP goes to hell and they hire a demon to play guitar, which will be Il Balletto Di Bronzo Is. look, for me, the fact that the vocals are a little bit off-centered just makes it all sound more evil. And it just works so well. Normally, I don't like those thin guitars in prog. I think that's always been a weakness of prog, that the keyboards are blazing and the fucking electric guitar is just slow and weepy. That, to me, I know, I'm crossing several boundaries, but I don't give a fuck. That is a weakness. That is a weakness. However, in this particular album, that angry electric mosquito tone is perfect. It's perfect. It gives it the right disturbing texture. I absolutely love that record. I bought it at Orion Studios in the 90s one day at a show. Chris Lemke just called me over, pulled it out of their bins and said, "You need this." And he wasn't fucking wrong. I do need it. I love that record. And I got to see them do it live at Baja. And Gianni Leone does not disappoint. He is a perverse little imp in real life too. You don't want that guy near your children, especially the boys.
You.
And I'm just saying, I adore the guy. I respect him immensely, but he's fucking twisted for sure. And the number one cannot go to anything other than Museo Rosenbach. The spokes that look, you may not like philosophy, you may not like the concept, whatever. One thing that is true that is usually forgotten is that this is called progressive rock. It's not called progressive pastoral wank. So you do need the albums to rock. You need the music to rock. And that album fucking does that. It rocks.
Yep.
It just does. And there isn't a single wasted minute in all of it. I have done this in the past. When people ask me about Italians, I'll tell them, look, these are very deep waters. But if you're like me and you came into the world of prog from metal and hard rock, that's your entry point. That is just such an easy transition because it has a lot of language that you're familiar with. And it just introduces you to a different idiom within that language. It's great. I love that record. It's perfect. I listen to it every year, at least twice, with headphones all the way through, no disruptions. I love it. So yeah, that could only be my number one.
All righty. All right, to finish this out here, my number two is Per Un Amico by PFM. It's one of their absolute classics. Often it's my favorite. Sometimes the debut is my favorite. It depends on my mood. I mean, it's got flutes and great electric and acoustic guitar, mellotrons, vocals are great. I love A Peña Un Po. Such a great opener. Amazing song. There's elements of Genesis and Gentle Giant and ELP, and Yes, all throughout this album, which I think is really cool. Man, the keyboards are so good, just absolutely so good. And at times you listen like on the title track, listen to the title track yesterday, and I'm thinking, man, I know Kansas was listening to these guys. Had to.
Wouldn't be surprised.
Absolutely had to have been, right? And yeah, Il Banchetto, Geranio, I mean, just it's all good. The whole album is great. But it's not my number one because my number one can only be Museo Rosenbach, Zarathustra. For all the reasons that everybody said, I mean, it's just the guitar work is so hard hitting. It's like you got the guitars and the Hammond and the Mellotron, and it's just so good. This guy Pitt Karate is just such a player. The guitars are great. I mean, to me, most of this album is kind of like ELP meets Gentle Giant meets Deep Purple. It's just boom. It's just so good. It's one of the greats of this whole movement, and that the 20-minute time. You know, this is one of the things that when I was kind of re-listening to this album again, I've heard it so many times. You know, we've done so many shows talking about like our favorite epics in Prague and related music. We never talk about this song. We always, you know, we talk about Supper's Ready and we talk about Close to the Edge and then Tarkus and others. Man, Zarathustra. Why do we never mention that song ever?
Because I think we compartmentalize the entire Italian scene.
I guess, but we shouldn't, right? It should be part of the discussion each
Sure.
and every time. It's just so good. I mean, it's just like absolute perfection. That whole track is just so great. So great. So yeah, so that's my number one. It's an amazing album. And if those of you watching have not heard it, as a couple of folks have mentioned, you need to go out and get it. That is our winner for today, almost unanimously. So, but you know, all these records are really great. And I know we're going to get some people, you know, asking, well, why didn't you include X album or Y album and all that? And there's no wrong answer. We could easily do a follow-up to this episode and pick 5 other great albums that are not by any of these bands here. And it would be just as hard, I think, because there's a lot of really great albums in the Italian scene that from this time period that are equally as good.
Just for conversation's sake, I got the scores from Rate Your Music.
Yep.
Museo Rosenbach is number 1, 3.83 average. Banco number 2, 3.81. PFM number 3, 3.80. Il Balletto Di Bronzo is 11th at 3.73, and Le Orme is 16th at 3.70. So all the top of that genre is real jammed in there.
And that's almost identical to how we rank these as a group.
Yeah.
It's pretty scary.
Just beat out Eloy.
What's that?
What's that?
I said they just beat out Eloy. So.
Yeah, of course.
There you go.
Just barely by an ass whooping.
All right. So, of course, everybody watching, your assignment is to rank these 5 legendary albums as you like them down in the comments below. It'll be interesting to see how folks are putting these in what order. And we'll see how this episode does, because we may yet return to Italy in the not too distant future, because I think there's a lot of albums that we have not mentioned that we could talk about and we could put together in a very similar type of format. So, but for next time, we've got the return of Stephen Reed here to In the Prog Seat next time for a very, very interesting little show. I'm not going to give too much away because, quite frankly, I don't think for those of us who know what the format's going to be, I don't even think we know how it's going to be. But Stephen is going to be the master of ceremonies, and he's going to throw all sorts. It's almost going to be like a game show. He's going to throw all sorts of things at us that we're going to have to just off the top of our heads answer. So there's no homework to be done. It'll be a pretty exciting episode, all about topics and things like that. So, Stephen,
Eric's reaction reminded me of my students. Whenever I say there's no homework, that's what they always give me, the 2 fucking thumbs up.
And I'm sitting in the back too, Louis.
So it should be loads of fun. So stay tuned 2 weeks from today for another episode of In the Prog Seat, hosted by Mr. Stephen Reed. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube all together.
All the damn time.
Get out your razor blade, start slicing that garlic right as you're watching this episode. And we'll see you next time here on In the Prog Seat for Eric Porter, Ken Golden, George Lemie, Chris Canzaneri, Chuck Alvarez, and Louis Nasser. I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. This special Italian Prague episode. Arrivederci. See you later. Take care. Bye-bye.